So we heard a lot about this morning that we need a lot of data to make not only informed decisions, but also to compete in this very competitive market space. And I know you have different angles, how you deal with data and what kind of products and services you offer through data. But I think one of the key questions, especially here in the markets, is for the operators, the smaller operators, how to compete with these global streamers and how they can really leverage their transnational markets or content. We learned a lot today already that not only the global content resonates, it's also the local or the transnational content that resonates very well with the audiences. But I would like to get your opinion on what would you advise, what would you give, what are your key messages or what kind of key lessons you learned from other markets? How do you compete in these, really, I would say, competitive environment? One of you want to go first?
Sure. Happy to kick it off. Well, I think, one of the most visible trends right now in the industry and something that we've been seeing in the US for a while and starting to see more and more in Europe, obviously, is the proliferation of SVOD platforms, right? To the point where it's a challenge for a consumer to have more than 3-4 subscription streaming platforms. And so this is naturally, I think, shifting the marketplace towards an AVOD model that complements these SVOD services. So I think it's very interesting to analyze, on the one hand, what makes an SVOD service worth paying a subscription and what makes it succeed. And on the other hand, and what content drives those decisions. And on the other hand, what are the different challenges that are placed for AVOD models to succeed in Europe, right? We're seeing a plethora of AVOD services landing here in the continent. One of the most recent ones and a partner of ours at Web Media is Pluto TV, for instance, that is growing traction in many territories, but there's many more. And I think this trend is here to stay.
Sorry, our prompter is not working, so I put my watch on here so that we not overrun. And we also want to open the floor after our discussion for the audience so that I keep track of that. You're saying it's the different business models, but also competing about audiences. But I think it's very difficult, I think, to compete with these global streamers. And I think the content is key, I think, that we learned, but also how you increase customer lifetime value, how you increase the stickiness of the service. And I think that's something how you win back customers, how you engage with customers. And I think to the presentation that we saw from Wine Labs, also how you understand what customers really want, right?
I think there's a perception that the market is full with some of the top end of town in terms of those headline services, Prime, Netflix, etc. But what we're seeing is that different geographies are actually wanting to see local content and have more relevance from their local markets, regionalized languages, sporting and things like that that are available over the top, which aren't necessarily making it onto those headline platforms. And so there's a few things that can influence the success of those platforms, and that is, number one, the content that they have access to, content agreements, as well as technology platform. And so enabling them to have access to technology platforms that have the serviceability and the usability and customer experience of a tier one OTT platform is key. And I think the market's developing to a place where we're able to service those customers affordably.
Yeah, I think, customer experience is going to be key. I mean, subscribers today are ruthless in their demands. I mean, it's so easy to cancel a subscription, and that's why we see churns at the levels that we see today, like 40, 50, 60%. So you can't, like the insights and the way you're trying to learn and understand your subscribers needs to go beyond like the superficial conclusions that we've drawn in the past. And we really need to dig in and drill down to the data and understand like what content resonates with my subscribers, not like what genre resonates with my subscribers, but like which emotional structure, which emotional appetite does my subscriber base have to content. So I think the stakes with all these services launching an SVOD or an AVOD platform, the stakes and what the consumers expect in terms of user experience have increased. I mean, it's not enough just to get the play button to work anymore. which was kind of the bar for many years. But now it's like, how do you make your service stand out from the other services, and how do you make your users feel like you understand them better than anybody else? I think that is key, because I don't think that there is a overcrowded landscape. I just think that it's more competitive, and I think subscribers are more ruthless in their demands, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with Marcus on that. I think there's probably 3 different stages when we look at the success of a streaming service. On the one hand, we have user acquisition, viewer acquisition, and I think having unique content is critical in that stage. It's something that really differentiates your services and that attracts those viewers. I think that then you have conversion, because a lot of subscription services today come with a trial period, and I think that both the UX as well as the ability to quickly profile that user and be able to provide strong recommendations is critical. And then you have retention. And I think it's on the retention side where you need to have like a breadth of content, put together that recommendation muscle, and be able to show the user that you understand them and that you're able to service them content, as well as I think it's important to ensure like a velocity in the release of new content so that you keep that user always engaged, no? And I think it's at this later stage where content and where international content can play like a very key role versus what traditionally have been like U.S. blockbuster content or local content that is very resonant to them. But I think that having content from other parts of the world at the point in which you've been able to learn and know your customer, and you have tools to recommend that content, whether it's through external apps like TV Time, whether it's through the analysis of the user journey, whether it's through also the emotional connection, right, to that content, that I think the 3 services here or our 3 technologies provide in some fashion. I think that's critical.
Yeah, I think one of the jokes we had on the preparation call was that these 3 companies would be great if you were looking to build your first OTT service, which kind of leads into the conversation about how the combination of technologies and a busy marketplace needs to be, I guess, sorted out by a product team who's looking to launch a new service, and how key the technology is in that.
Yeah, we figure out how to merge backstage in a couple of minutes here while we're waiting.
Yeah, but I think it comes to another point that usually the smaller operators or transnational operators don't have the resources nor the knowledge of these global players, right? So how to overcome that in also resources, as we know, for data analytics and data people and solution architects and everything who drives this business is scarce. I mean, even in these markets, even that we have, especially Central and Eastern Europe, has a long legacy in programmers and good programmers. So what is your advice, or what is your thoughts about this, how you overcome these small, as I said, the lack of resources, but also the go-to-market? You have to be much quicker nowadays, react to new trends or different kind of behaviors or different kind of, as you said, customers have a tendency they're not loyal anymore, so they go where the content is going, right? They're following the content, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, but I think it's like with any business, focus on what you're good at, right? I mean, if you're a local provider, you know your market and your business better than anybody else, and I think that's how you compete against the big players, the global players. Like, they have the global reach and the global insights, and they use that global data to make local decisions. But like, the local knowledge is how you compete. But what you need is the tools and the data in order to empower your marketing teams. So, I mean, I think even the big streamers, there are things that you should do yourself, and that's the things that you're really good at, which is usually know your subscriber, the marketing piece, the editorial piece, know which content works for your subscriber base. But to go and build all these tools yourself, you need an engineering team of 400 or 500 subscribers. So I think it's, or 400 or 500 engineers, not well, it'd be great if subscribers build it for you.
Eventually pay for it.
Exactly. No, but I think that, focus on what you're good at, and then I think every technology platform out there is moving to more a modularized approach. Like, one size doesn't fit everybody. So, pick the pieces that is core to complement the teams that you have internally, I would say. Because if you're trying to do it all at once, you will spend many years, and it will be really, really expensive.
Yeah, for sure, and I 100% agree. I think at a macro level, in terms of the dynamicism of smaller companies, people who are new to market, who don't have a 500 developer team who are doing stage releases of small features, you're able to be a lot more nimble. I think there's a definite advantage in that from a technology perspective.
So pretty much start and learn, and while you learn, you tweak and change and adapt, and pretty much that's also, and understanding your local market better than probably a global player that with the same content.
And don't lose sight of the subscriber. I mean, so many times when we talk about technology, we get stuck in a discussion of technology. I mean, technology, it doesn't really matter how the technology is built. The question is, how does it impact the user experience? Right? At the end of the day, we always need to remember that technology is only there to serve a purpose, but we can never lose sight of the subscriber journey. So how can we, in every part of the life cycle of that subscriber, make their experience so good that they never want to go anywhere else? I think even internally, when we sit and discuss features, it's so easy to get stuck in the engineering mindset when you talk about technology. But at the end of the day, we're building solutions. We're trying to push content to subscribers, and content that they like, not content that has the highest profitability or that is good for P&L, like a certain player out there has been doing for a while. But the best thing for the end subscriber, I think we should never lose sight of that.
Yeah, speaking of content, I think that's also a good discussion to have. What kind of content resonates in which market, right? So that we see the decline of Netflix in this region, but also in Western Europe. We see now the new quotas with the EU that pretty much forces local production. So it looks better, honestly, to look back like what we had in a broadcast environment where. So, but is that really actually catering to the audience, or is it more like, we try to regulate a market, right? So, the question is, how important is content? And I would even argue that in many cases that you need a really small library to drive uptake. So it's not really the things, but you have more insights on how content is being, or what's happening on the content side of the business. That's more competition about acquiring and licensing content.
Sure. Well, I think my colleague Elisa mentioned it earlier, that there's definitely a trend that we see here in Europe where, the past 3 years in different countries, between 10 and 20% of U.S. content consumption has decreased, right? And I think that has opened an opportunity for content from other parts of the world to fill that gap. I think traditionally, a lot of broadcasters would have a mixed structure of local content and either US or UK sourced content, right? Traditionally from major studios. And so that is definitely changing. And it's not only, by the way, changing for local players, but also if you see the consumption trends for Netflix in different regions here in different countries, you will see that as well. And I think that that's very interesting, right? And it brings a set of challenges, I think, that can be embraced by some of these companies. Obviously, content that is not US produced can be acquired at a lower cost, but at the same time can have an even stronger, or if not stronger, impact on viewer retention, particularly, I think. And so I think there's different challenges. Like one is identifying that niche demand, I think, and using data to find both content and audience affinity. And there's different sets of data. We have our own through TV time. I think you have your own through analyzing viewer consumption trends for all your services. Yeah. You have your own set of data as well through analyzing the emotional attachment of content on the viewer. Then you have to service that demand, how to find and source and license that content. That's why for instance, we build the exchange for that same purpose. You need to then, I think, establish connections between what is the local content that that works with these other titles that you've sourced from other territories in the region. And then there's also challenges in terms of delivery, fulfillment, and localization, right? Because when you're sourcing from a wider plethora of smaller players, you need to be able to consolidate all the delivery and fulfillment, and also do a good analysis on the cost of these transactions, right? When is it worth for me to acquire content that maybe is not so mainstream, but I think that has the potential, right, to be valuable to my service, but where maybe the localization or the assets or whatever it is that you need to be able to service that content to your audience are not yet ready.
But that also means, and I think what we see in the market in the last year, especially also driven to the pandemic, is that the cost of content is going up significantly, and also the amount of features that you need to bring to the market, also the demand is, I would say, the expectation, I would say, is also going up. So I think there's a give and take between the content licensing budget, the operational of the platforms, and also the marketing activities that you need to have in place to retain your audiences and to prevent churn and everything. I think it gets not only more complex, but it's also getting more costly in the moment to operate these businesses. And the question is how we, as technology, can we help to resolve that or keep the OpEx lower instead of what we discussed before, building yourself. But I think there's also much more support needed from a technology side also to keep the costs not down, but at least to keep the cost manageable, right?
Sure. I think a lot of that is how do you keep a stable bottom line, right? So
Right.
how does technology translate into the ability to service different models of monetization? And being careful about being dynamic, as I said before, in that you may launch with a free service or AVOD service or freemium or SVOD or TVOD, but keeping your options open in terms of the flavors of technology platform and how that leads into monetization. So being dynamic is key.
And I think that's also a shift that we have seen in the last, say, 12, 18 months, that before you really had to decide if you've been an AVOD, an SVOD, or a freemium, what kind of model. And now we see all these models are being more blurring and the business models are changing.
Yep.
And the question is the content industry accommodating that from the licensing perspective, right? So I think it's one after the other, but I think to Chris, with your point, I think that's very important to understand that you need to be open to tweak
Yep.
new models. And
It's a lot easier to go and talk to a big content provider once you've got 500,000 paying subs on local content, because obviously you've grabbed their attention. And we just launched a new service in Northern Africa, traditionally a market for us that's been, I guess, risky in terms of success of service and effort put towards projects, but it's gone gangbusters. And that company now is a company called Watch Now, who's now looking at 3 different geographies. We got them to market in 12 weeks with an MVP. AVOD funded. We're now talking about SVOD, TVOD. They're getting, there's conversations with sporting rights and things like that. So building that MVP quickly, getting it to market in a robust way that allows the customer to have a great CX at a cost that isn't going to break the back of what's essentially a startup is really important.
interesting, especially for these emerging markets where VOD or video in general is quite a new topic. Any other thoughts about how you retain customers as great content, good marketing, good usability? Any other KPIs that come to your mind that you see that is really important that an operator of an OTT should take attention or pay attention to?
CX and UX is so important. Like I won't name the service, but it's a major UK provider, huge OTT platform. I wanted some content from a particular studio that isn't on the platforms that I have access to. I made that initial purchase and I wanted to download a bunch of content. And then when I got onto the plane, I realized that the UX was terrible. All my episodes were out of order. I couldn't, half the downloads failed and things like that. So those things are so important because I immediately canceled that service. So UX and CX is on top of content, and how that plays into technology is just tremendously important. It can't be understated, overstated.
I mean, it sounds so easy when you say it, right? That it's just get the basics right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's having the right content on your platform that resonates with your user base. I mean, that's step one, because we so many times see libraries where you have like 10, 15, 20,000 titles in the library that you're probably spending a huge amount of money on. But given like your data coverage and given the technology that you're using to service this content to your subscribers, the subscriber feels like you're having 150 titles, because you see the same titles every time. So you're spending like millions and millions of content, but you're spending so little time and effort on the UX, so that you're not connecting the piece. So I mean, in my mind, you could have, you know, like 1,000, 1,500 titles on your platform if it's really well understood how it resonates with your user base, how you activate them by telling the users, like through email campaigns or understanding the persona groups of, you know, how am I gonna reach out to the subscribers so that they understand that the content is now on the platform. And then when they log in, you know, it should be seamless. Like the right title should be in front of them, the UX should be nice, it should be engaging, you know, it shouldn't be an offsetting poster, it should be maybe a moving preview that gets me a taste of what I'm about to see. So, like, it's getting the basics right, but it's, you know, it's the technology hasn't really been available, I guess, for a long time to get it right. So that's why, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the companies here, and like the content licensing has been really a lot of gut feeling for a long time. So I'm also glad to see that there's some data-driven activities coming in there.
The metadata is key as well. I mean, it's what is metadata? We talk about it in the industry all the time. You log into our platform and I say you can change the metadata, but do you know what that actually means in terms of how you're surfacing what the customer wants and how that leads into the customer journey? And there's all these great startups now that are coming out of the sort of startup mill that are surfacing that data. We heard from, you know, a couple of them today. So get you a consultant is my recommendation as well. Use the consultant base, because you're probably not an expert on all this stuff. And if you're about to make a large acquisition of different technology platforms, you really need to speak with someone who has a breadth of experience in the requisite platforms you're trying to purchase.
Yeah, I think I think UX is particularly relevant at the conversion stage, because no one subscribes to a service based on the UX. No one, you know, I don't hear like from any of my friends that say you should check out HBO Max because the experience is fantastic. It's more like, you know, in order to launch a service, I think you need to have a very clear value proposition on what makes your service unique in terms of content. I think when you talk about conversion, and conversion is both, you know, you can think about trial conversion on an SVOD level, but you can also think about conversion on an AVOD or TVOD service just by looking at, you know, engagement of a user over the initial 30 days. And I think that's where the UX and the recommendation, right? You were trying this new service, you were going on a plane, and it's terrible. Well, that's really, really bad. And I think then the other thing is making sure that there's not a disconnect between what you know about your audience and your programming strategy, and then your content acquisition strategy. So that once you've been able to identify what your audience wants, that your acquisition team is able to identify what's in the market that is closer to what you need to serve to your customers, right? And I think if you're able to ensure that, then you have a shot.
Yeah, I think collaboration is key, and also, as you said, this connect between content licensing, marketing, go-to-market, and I think in general, I think it's getting more complex to manage these business. And not complicated, but it's complex because you have to keep so many things organized, and also they need to work together and collaborate. And I think in most situations where broadcasters or also operators go into that business, they're not being set up for this kind of, the operations are not set up to run these businesses, because as I always say, it's a business on its own right. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing right now. It's maturing on the one hand, but also technology can help you to scale, but you need to have other forms of organization. Any examples that you think, I mean, you had a good example with this African operator or market, other that you come to your mind, we're saying this is one of the good benchmarks in the market where you think that is something people can learn from, or that's really, they get it right, or they really do a good job, things that you could think of?
I can think of a risk, and that's if you're launching an AVOD service. I think So advertising is, the technology stacks that we deploy in the television or digital television industry, OTT, like behind the scenes are actually immensely complex. And then as a subset of that, you have the whole supply and demand side of advertising. Google's in the mix. This is a key monetization strategy for what can be a service in its infancy. And so making some careful decisions around how you allocate funds and budget to ensure that when you launch an AVOD service, that things like fill rate are going to be good, that the inventory you're serving is appropriate, that you have the right cohorting mechanisms in place to be able to drive the right inventory to the right people. And that leads into some other technology decisions across platform, such as my colleagues here on stage can provide, in how we get the right content to the right people and understand the viewer journey.
But
Well, if I may add to that, I think
Yeah.
I think AVOD is a very interesting model because even for companies that are licensing content to AVOD platforms, I mean, they have to look at this more as a partnership opportunity, right? Because ultimately, you're dependent on the ability of your partner to position, to program your content, and to match it with the right ad inventory. So I think that the more that the licensee can provide in terms of demographic data, how to best position that content, how that content can be marketed, and even support that they can do on their side, the more chances that that content is going to succeed and benefit both parties, which I don't think was so much the case at an SVOD level, where you were just licensing your content for a flat amount and then you move on to your next project, right? I think at an AVOD level, it becomes much more of a partnership, and I think that the content sellers out there need to nowadays have a deep of a knowledge base on the demographic and audience and appeal of their content as their platforms that they're selling to.
Agreed.
that you also can take then to the content licensing negotiations agreements because you have more knowledge about your audiences. And I think that's also educating the licensors about what is currently going on the market. And I think that's also something that's key, that the data drives not only this informed decision for the acquisition of content, but also to define the business model between licensing and licensor. And I think that's also changing dramatically because they also go on direct. On the other hand, they need still the market to monetize in the audience. But going back to these recommendations and keeping the customer in the service or keep the viewer in the service, you said we both all pointed out UX, UI, but there are other mechanism you could think of that really drives the audience. It's a good library, but also I think is there other things that you have learned from your projects and from your customers that you could share with the audience that could be of interest?
I mean, I think it's about differentiating and being unique. I mean, not just in UX, but to have a very clear, like when people go to your service, they should expect what to get, right? So they have your niche in order what makes you unique. Like you're never going to be able to compete with having more blockbusters on your platform than an HBO or a Netflix or an Amazon Prime because you don't have that budget. But you need to have a very clear, structured profile and vision for your service so that when the subscribers say, okay, I'm in the mood for a Turkish telenovela or I'm in the mood for a Swedish crime or something similar, then I know where to go. Mm-hmm. I think that's what we've seen is like one of our customers in the US, they are focused on getting Hispanic content, so the Latin America telenovelas to the US. So they stay extremely focused to their target group. And they don't try and expand beyond that and bringing in, okay, now we're getting a bunch of subscribers, so let's try and be something we're not. Like staying really core to their mission, and they're getting a really loyal subscriber base and keeps growing and doing really well. So I think it's really important not to lose sight of like if you're a niche streaming provider, even if you get a bunch of subscribers, stay niche to the vision so that the subscribers know what they're getting when they get to the platform. We've seen that many times that the companies that stay very true to that tends to be successful.
Yeah, you see national broadcasters that behave like that. Like, so for instance, we work with the BBC, and you've got 1, 3, 4 different channels and flavors, and you know where to head. Like you said, if you want to watch someone pulling somebody over in Bradford on a police stop, or you want to go and watch some serious news. So yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah, I think the key is the word mood that you just mentioned, Marcus, because I think it's not so much. I think we need to move past looking at content just from a genre standpoint, but I think the sentiment that content generates on the audience is key. And we see more and more of our partner streaming services that are surfacing that information. And one of the key things that we're doing is surfacing that information ahead of the stage in which the content is licensed, so that then you can really align what mood you want to cater to from the perspective of your audience to what mood is content available in the market impregnated with, let's say. So I think mood versus genre. I think it's really important because people are not thinking anymore about action, thriller, horror. They're more thinking about how the content makes them feel.
And I think it's also the pandemic embraced it a bit because people are just stayed more home and watched everything more, and their mood is probably good to understand. And if you understand it well, you probably have less churn and higher consumption rates. I think we started a little bit later as we started, so I would like to open the floor to the audience, and if you have any questions for the panelists and something you would be interested, whatever.
I know someone's got a technology problem. Come on.
Oh yeah, if you have any technology problems, we also take them. So feel free to ask some questions. No questions? No.
Great attendance, man.
Crystal clear.
Huh?
Crystal clear. Crystal clear.
Okay, crystal clear. So everybody's ready to start or runs a successful video business then.
Good to know.
Good to know. So.
Or how many people in the audience are work for a streaming service? I'd be curious too. Great.
Who's planning on going OTT or is already OTT with their content or services?
All right, you just stay there. I'll come and speak after. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So your service will come at a cost, and it's because there's a lot of work that you do and your teams are doing. So there will be a pricing model, and I assume that you will not open that pricing model right now. But there will be, let's say, a critical size for your customers, where you would say, okay, from that size onwards, it would make sense to integrate your services. Can you give us a household number, whether it's number of subscribers, number of amount of revenues or whatever, where you would say, okay, when you have this size as a streaming platform, then it would be a customer that you would like to look at?
I'll start. I talk to anybody, and my business is quite mature, and we have services that go from a couple of hours of live events streaming all the way up to major new OTT services, and we have different product cohorts that service all of those different needs in the market. And so we work from the very small all the way up to the very big. So, but we have a wide product set. But I think these guys have a little more. I guess, niche services that cater to specific needs for new services. So I'll hand over to you guys.
Sure. I mean, we're in the process right now with our content exchange on catering to the global industry, and so we're really looking forward to working with the main players for every region, no matter how big or small that region is, right? Because we don't not only cater to streaming platforms or linear broadcasters, but we also cater to content studios and to sales agents, right? And they're looking to expand also their footprint internationally, and particularly leverage this trend of content travelability. So from our perspective, there's no territory that's too small for us to have a conversation with. We obviously want to talk with the main players in each of these territories and make sure that they're able to benefit from what we bring to the market, and conversely, that our sellers find like an easier, faster, smarter way to position their content to all these buyers.
I don't think you're ever going to hear any of us saying that you have to wait until you reach a certain size. But I mean, I think my point is always the later you start, the harder it will be to catch up. I mean, if you're just launching to get the play button to work early, and then later on you realize that, okay, now I need to maybe provide recommendations and I need to be more smarter how I buy my content. To have like data as a part of your strategy and to drive your insights and your decisions, I think is something that you should start on from day one, because otherwise you will waste a lot of money doing it wrong. So I mean, we have customers that we're helping launching, and we have bigger customers that have multinational corporations. So I think most tech platforms out there have modularized offerings to cater for services starting today, as well as for the really big guys who need a little bit more scalable technology. But I would say like the later you wait with thinking about how to differentiate your service or user experience, or how to know your subscribers better, or to be more smart about how you put content on your platform, I think you will waste more money in that process versus the money you spend doing it right from the beginning.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, as you're saying, go with someone who can grow with you. So just make sure that the feature set that you have with your long-term vision can be switched on later. So don't necessarily go for a bottom-tier operator. Find a top-tier operator who'll start small with you.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I would close this panel. Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and hope you also enjoyed the conversation. And yeah.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Very much. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.